Chapter 16. The wild geese took the route into Västergötland and came down on a large field in the neighborhood of Falköping. They stayed there and had a happy time with other flocks of geese, though Nils was not so happy. If only I'd left Skane behind me and was already in foreign parts, then I would know there was no longer anything to hope for, he said to himself. A week or two later, they at last departed and headed over the Holland hills into Skane. The boy hung over the gander's neck and raised his eyes. As he saw the plain spreading right over the horizon, he was both pleased and anxious. I can't be far away from home now. When he saw the first clump of willows and the first timber-framed house, his heart ached with homesickness. During their midday rest, Akka came over to Nils. "The weather's calm now, so I thought we'd cross the Baltic tomorrow," she said. "Oh, he said, rather briefly, for his throat was so tight he was unable to speak, hoping the spell would be lifted from him after all. "We're quite near Västra Vemmenhög," said Akka. "Perhaps you'd like to go home for a while to see them." "Better not," said Nils, but you could hear from his voice that he was pleased with the suggestion. "If the gander stays here with us, nothing can go wrong," said Akka. "You ought to find out how things are at home. Perhaps you can help them in some way, although you're small." "Yes, you're right, Mother Akka. I ought to have thought of that before," he replied eagerly, and the next moment they were off. It wasn't long before Akka flew down behind the stone wall round Holger Nilsson's farm. Nils Holgersson quickly climbed up onto it. "Just think, it's just the same. It seems like yesterday when I saw you flying in." "Has your father a gun?" said Akka uneasily. "Yes, of course. It was because of the gun I stayed away from church that Sunday," said Nils. "Then I daren't wait for you. You'll have to come and meet me at Smigenhook early tomorrow morning." "Oh no, don't go, Mother Akka." The boy sensed something was going to happen, and they would never meet again. "You've probably noticed I've been miserable because I can never be big again," he said. "But don't think I regret going with you. I'd rather remain a gnome than not have made this journey." Akka drew several deep breaths before she answered. "You talk as if we were never going to meet again, but we'll see each other tomorrow morning, won't we?" She stroked the top of Tom Thumb's head with her beak, then flew away. The farm was quiet, and there was no one in sight. Nils hurried to the cowshed, for he knew they would tell him what was going on. May Rose was alone inside, her head hanging. The boy ran fearlessly into her stall. "Good day, May Rose. How are Mother and Father and the rest of you on the farm?" May Rose stared back and lowered her horns. Yes, he was just as small and wearing the same clothes as when he had left, but all the same, he was different, lively and agile, no longer a lazy dullard, his eyes bright and his stance jaunty. May Rose was pleased to see him. "Moo," she lowed. "Welcome home. They said you'd changed, but I didn't really believe it. Your parents have had nothing but sorrows since you went away. Worst of all, with the new horse. There's something wrong with him, and no one can find out what. He can't work, and they can't sell him. They had to get rid of Star and Lily instead." "I suppose Mother was sad when Martin flew away," said the boy. "Yes," said May Rose, "but mostly because she thought you had stolen the gander and slipped away with him. Although I'll have you know she grieves for you in the way you grieve for the loss of what is dearest to you." The horse in the stable was so fine and handsome, Nils could hardly believe there was anything wrong with him. "I've got a nail in my foot, and it hurts so that I can't walk," the horse told him. "The doctor hasn't been able to find it, but if you could help me, I'd be very pleased. I'm really ashamed of standing here eating without doing any work." "Thank goodness you're not really ill," said Nils. "I'll try to arrange for you to be cured. May I draw a little on your hoof?" He had hardly finished when he heard his parents' voices out in the yard. Oh, how troubled they sounded. "If that horse doesn't get better soon, I'll have to sell the farm," his father was saying. "I wouldn't say anything if it weren't for the boy," sighed his mother. "But where will he go if he comes back poor and miserable, and we're not here? If only I had him back, I would ask for nothing else." And father agreed with her entirely. Then he went into the stable, and Nils had to creep away and hide in a corner. As usual, Holger Nilsson picked up the horse's foot to try to find what was wrong. "But what's this?" he said. "There's something scratched on the hoof." "Take the nail out of his foot." "Yes, I do believe there's something sharp inside there." As father was busy with the horse and the boy was still hidden in the corner of the stable, another stranger came to the farm. It was Martin, who had been unable to resist the temptation to show his family what a good lifetime he had as a tame goose, and was now walking proudly round the yard with them. As the door to the cowshed was open, he went inside with Dunfin and all 6 young geese in a long line behind him. "Come back and look at the goose pen. It's all right, not dangerous," he said. "Look, oats in the feeding trough." But the geese had hardly reached the trough when the door of the goose pen slammed shut, and the mistress of the house was standing outside, putting the hook back on the hasp. "Father, come and look," she called. "The gander's in the goose pen with 7 wild geese." "And I've found out what's wrong with the horse," said father. "I think our luck has turned. But best of all is that we don't have to think Nils stole the gander. It's a pity, but we'll have to slaughter them this evening if we're to get them to town in time. It's Martinmas in a few days. Come and help me take them into the house." A moment or so later, the boy saw father carrying Dunfin and Martin under his arms and going into the house. The gander was screaming, "Tom Thumb, come and help me," just as he usually did when he was in danger, although he didn't know the boy was nearby. Nils Holgersson heard him all right, but stayed where he was behind the stable door. He was hesitating because if Martin were killed, that would be an advantage to him. He hadn't given a thought to the gnome's conditions at the moment, but he was thinking that he would have to show himself to mother and father if he were to save the gander, and he didn't want to do that. Things are hard enough for them now anyhow, he thought. Do I have to add to their sorrows? But when the door of the cottage closed, Nils sprang to life, rushed across the yard, leapt up on the oak board at the foot of the doorway and onto the porch. Out of habit, he kicked off his clogs and went over to the door. But then, as he was so reluctant to show himself to his parents as a little creature, he simply couldn't lift his hand to knock. "Don't forget, this is about Martin, your best friend ever since you were last here," he said to himself. He thought about everything he and the gander had gone through on frozen lakes and stormy seas and among dangerous predators. Then he felt gratitude and love in his heart and overcame his doubts and banged on the door so that it swung open. When he saw the gander on the slaughtering bench, he cried out, "Mother, you mustn't touch the gander!" And at once Martin and Dunfin let out cries of delight, so he knew they were still alive. And Mother also let out a cry of delight. "Oh, how big and handsome you've become," she cried, letting go of the gander. The boy had not gone inside, but was still standing in the doorway, as if uncertain of his reception. "Oh, thank heavens I have you back again," said his mother. "Come inside." "Oh, how welcome you are," said father, incapable of uttering another word. But Nils was still hesitating in the doorway, unable to understand why they were so pleased to see him the way he was. But when Mother came and flung her arms round him and pulled him into the room, he realized what had happened. "Mother, Father, I'm human again," he cried.